Our first speaker this morning is Susan Brown. Susan is the Director of IT at Telligent. If any of you are familiar with Telligent in Des Moines, it's one of the organizations that provides services, I think, to Medicaid managed care here in the state. It also provides services as a Medicare contractor. And they do a lot of things. The nice thing about her, if relatively speaking, is she's not going to talk about IT. For those of us that have been like we're in our office who kind of glaze over it, the thought of IT, she's not going to talk about it. But she's going to talk about creating a culture of person and family engagement. And the whole idea behind this is to talk about how we as clinics can do one more thing as part of being a patient-centered medical home that will really affect, it can really affect the patients that we care for. So I'm going to turn this over to Susan, and she will bring what she has to share with us this morning. Thank you for being here.
So as Dale said, I live in Iowa. I'm from Waukee. It's a suburb of Des Moines. And I'm amazed that anyone's here on a game day. I thought you all had LinkedIn, so I didn't know who would show up today. So hats off to you for focusing on improving healthcare on a game day here in Nebraska. This room is a bit challenging because I've got people clear over here to the left, clear over here to the right. So I'll try to keep spanning the audience and make eye contact, but if I don't, it's because it's a little bit of a challenge. So anyway, as Dale mentioned, I work for Telligent, and I'm not going to focus on that today, but just as an FYI, we are the data contractor for the CPC Plus program, so I heard you talking about that right when I came in this morning. We also test measures for ACO. We own the measure authoring tool that tests all of the quality measures for what was meaningful use and is now promoting interoperability, as well as ACO measures. So we have our hands in a lot of the alternative payment models that CMS is trying to implement. So if, on a side note, if you ever want to chat with me about any of that, I would be happy to. My contact information is at the end of this presentation. But I'm going to take off my work hat for now, and I want to talk about person-centered care. And you might be thinking, why is this IT person here talking to us about this? Well, I have two special needs kids. They're adults now. And so I've spent a lot of time navigating the healthcare system on their behalf. And I think I have some good success stories to share. And what I really want you to come away with today is maybe a different perspective on patient engagement and some very practical ideas that you can take back to your clinic. I'm a pretty no-fluff person. I don't like a lot of theory. I would rather give you some practical ideas that you can take home. So I'm just going to start with a short video that reminds us of why we're all in the business in the first place. And if someone could maybe dim one of the lights, that would be great. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm also on CMS's national faculty for person and family engagement. it's a popular one. So I just want to introduce myself and my family. And so I'm a divorced mom of 3. And my kids are Caleb, who's to the right of me. He's 24. He just graduated from law school at WashU in St. Louis. And he got a job with Arthur Cox Law Firm in Ireland, of all places. So he's moving October 7th to Ireland. And then Jessica is 21, and Reese is 20. So I had a really normal life. I went to college, went to graduate school, got married, worked for a while, and then had 3 kids in 5 years. I know, I was appalled too. But Caleb was just fine, and so we didn't recognize at that time that there was a genetic condition in my family. I was the carrier, but I didn't have present any symptoms. My dad was a carrier, my sister and aunt are carriers, and it presented itself in my younger 2 kids. So Jessica and Reese both have full mutations, what's called a Fragile X syndrome. So this is a lifelong intellectual disability that the kids were diagnosed when Jessica was 3 and Reese was 2. They were diagnosed by Mayo Clinic. And my dad, who's a physician, had never heard of it. I had never heard of it. So when our pediatrician called me, I went home and Googled it and realized that that day my entire life changed. My kids, the dreams that you have for your family change in an instant. I realized at that point that they would not be on a regular path in terms of growing up, going to college, pursuing their own dreams, having their own families, that instead that this would require lifetime care and a lot of tough decisions. So how it manifests itself is the girls that have it are higher functioning. So Jessica has an IQ of 40. I believe normal is somewhere in the 70 to 80. Low end of normal is somewhere 70 to 80. So she's got an IQ of 40. She can read. She'll never drive or manage her own finances. She has a lot of good life skills. And she works at Hy-Vee, our local grocery store. She takes a transportation service to work. Reese, on the other hand, is a lot tougher. He's got an IQ of 9. He's never spoken. He's 20 years old. He's incontinent, and he's had seizures until just a couple of years ago, which I'm going to talk about. But my point in telling you this is just to understand the context that I'm coming from, and the fact that I've spent a lot of time in the healthcare system, because over the last 20 years times 2, these kids have seen, of course, their pediatrician. Reese has a neurologist, a psychiatrist. He's on Risperidone. It's an anti-schizophrenic med, as well as Abilify, and he was on Trileptal for his seizures. And then, of course, over the years, they've seen occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, special needs dentists, special needs eye care providers, and the list goes on and on. And what I have found, just in my 20 years times 2 of navigating the system for them, is that we have worked with amazing providers. So I want to thank you for dedicating your life to this role, because you, meaning the broader provider community, have truly made our lives better than they would have been without you. So I thank you for that. What has been frustrating over the years is that the system is not designed to care for these individuals. We are expected to come into a system and adapt to it versus the system adapting to us. And that's kind of what I want to leave you thinking about today, is how you can become more person-centered. And the reason CMS they're starting to use the word person-centered versus patient-centered, is that really people spend a sliver of their life in the healthcare system. And so we need to consider the whole person when we're talking about someone's health and healthcare. So patient-centered is kind of moving to person-centered care, but anyway, semantics. So the last thing I want to say on this is that, you know, the kids are happy, they're doing well, but this whole experience really forced me at a fairly young age. So I was 32 when the kids were diagnosed. And I think that's pretty early to grapple with these sort of life-changing issues. And it's something that no one can ever take away from me. So in that sense, I'm thankful for the lessons. So it forces you to really look at what is life about and why are you here? You ask yourself these questions. And how can you reconcile the fact that these kids will never, you know, in our way of thinking, you know, achieve the fullness of being able to make their own decisions and live a full life. And, you know, I don't want to sound preachy, you don't have to agree with this, but what it helped me wrestle through is the fact that this life is temporary, that this life is short. And I'll make the best decisions that I can each year on their behalf, but I truly believe that they are both deposits in heaven. I don't think that they'll be held accountable because they don't have the capacity to make those kind of decisions. And I do know that someday I'll have long conversations with Reese, my youngest, about life. So anyway, that's how I come to terms with it. And I actually worry much more about my oldest son because he has the ability to choose the path for his life. And I want him to choose well. So anyway. So what is person and family engagement? I don't usually like starting presentations with definitions, but I actually really like the definition that CMS has put out for person and family engagement because they say patients and families are partners in defining, designing, participating in, and assessing the care of the practices and systems that serve them. And I just want to hone in on that for a minute. Because I don't think that doing a patient satisfaction survey and looking at your CAHPS score really captures the essence of this definition. And I want to ask you as SERPA-ACO and as clinicians and as human beings, are you really partnering with patients and families in the design of the care that you provide? Not just assessing the care after the fact, but partnering with them in defining, designing, participating in, and assessing the care that's provided. I think that's a way bigger scope of work than just doing a patient satisfaction survey and taking a glance at the results. And then beyond that, are you partnering with them to ensure that you're being respectful of and responsive to individual patient preferences, needs, and values? Now, I realize that you can't cater to every single person, every single niche request, but there are similarities among things that would really help patients and families as they navigate the healthcare system. So here's another definition. I really wish my doctor would quit asking me so much about my life. The office is always bothering me about what's working well or not so well for me and my family. They keep increasing the use of technology to make things more convenient, like banking has, but I'd rather play phone tag. They said they want me as part of the team to share in the decisions and to improve our experience. It's almost like a customer service approach. This is healthcare, not Amazon. So who said this? Well, no one. So that's the opposite of, I think, what most patients and families would want. So I'm going to tell you 4 of these success stories that I mentioned that I personally experienced with my kids, and I don't expect these to all be replicated within your own practice. I'm just trying to give you a flavor as to some of the ideas that I'm talking about. And my 4 stories are these, and they're pretty simple, nothing rocket science. So my first story has to do with care coordination. And I just have to say that to take Reese to any appointment is a major endeavor. And I love that video that I showed at first because it demonstrates that none of us ever really know what's going on in someone's life when they present for a visit. Just like I don't know what's going on in your lives. I mean, you are human beings with families, with your own health issues, with the financial pressure that you face trying to keep your practices thriving. And I have no idea the pressure that you face day to day. And just like you don't know what it's taken me to even get to the doorway of an office visit. So when I take Reese in for a visit, what typically happens is I have to pull him out of his day habilitation program, which is his routine, it's his happy place. I have to pull him out of there. He doesn't understand why. It disrupts his day. I take time off work. We go to a building where it's even hard to get him out of the car because he doesn't know why we're at this strange building. He doesn't like to walk through the doorway if he doesn't know what's on the other side. Special needs people, if you know, they love routine. They love to know what to expect. So even getting him in through the doorway is hard, and then I often have to deal with his toileting needs since he's incontinent. And if he's hungry, I always bring snacks in his backpack. So it is a major endeavor just to get him to a visit. And then typically I'm handed either a clipboard, not so much clipboards these days, more like an iPad, to scroll through about 25 screens and verify all this information that I feel like I just verified like 2 months ago, while trying to juggle him walking around the office, back and forth, pacing, wanting to leave. Okay, so then after we've waited for some unspecified amount of time, we don't know whether it will be 5 minutes or 30 minutes, we have to walk through more doorways where he's expected to stand on a scale. Well, he doesn't know what a scale is or why he needs to stand on it, or that he has to stand still when he's on it, or it won't take a reading. He doesn't understand a blood pressure cuff that squeezes his arm. So usually he's not compliant, and they say non-compliant in his record. Then he's taken to another room with a cold metal table with squishy white paper on it, and he doesn't like that, so he sits on the floor. And the provider comes in, and it's basically a conversation with me about the situation. They do what they need to do, adjust his meds, or tell me he's fine, come back in 6 months or 3 months, and we leave. And so that is not a fun experience for me or for him. And I just, the provider has no clue what it's even taken me to get there, just like I have no clue what your day has been like either. So my story about care coordination is that Reese needed outpatient surgery a couple of years ago, and I was just dreading the whole thing because, it just is not his thing. So I had the pre-op phone conversation, and it occurred to me that while Reese was sedated, that this would be an amazing opportunity to just descend on him and do a bunch of stuff that normally is very difficult. So when I got off the phone after the pre-op call, I called the office manager back and I said, okay, I know you're gonna say no, I know you're gonna think I'm crazy, but could we see if anesthesiology would keep Reese sedated after his procedure, because there's a bunch of stuff I'd like to do. Like I'd like my brother-in-law to come in and cut his hair, and I'd like to shave him without him pulling away from me, and cut his nails. And could we have phlebotomy come in and do his blood draws for his seizure meds, because it takes like 3 people to hold him down. And by the way, could I call my dental hygienist, because he could really use like a thorough cleaning. He never complies at the dentist. So she said, okay, well, I'll talk to the anesthesiologist about it. I fully expected them to say no, and she talked to him, and he has a special needs family member. So he agreed to do it. He said, sure, no problem. So I came in with a team that day on his outpatient surgery, and he literally had 8 different services, including personal hygiene and dental care, that would have taken 8 different visits he had in that one visit, with no stress to him, It made me feel respected and part of the healthcare team. And I know the providers left that day with a lot of joy in their work. So that's my story about care coordination. I don't expect that could be replicated, but it's just an example of an office that didn't say, oh, we don't do that here. We've never done things like that, because patients don't like to hear that. So care coordination, that's one thing. Use of technology. So Reese's meds are very strong, especially his Risperdal. And I noticed about 6 months ago, he was having an eye rolling effect. His eyes would roll up and then fixate. And the provider called it, I think, dystonia, a dystonia effect of the med. So I noticed him doing it. I was documenting how many times it was happening a day. And I called the office and I said, if I can capture an iPhone video of this happening, could I send it to you? So the nurse said, sure. She gave me her email address. So he was in his bedroom and I saw it happening. I took a 3-minute iPhone video. I had the email address written down on a notepad in the kitchen. I went, without even opening my computer, I sent it to her directly from my iPhone. Within an hour, she had shown it to his neurologist. She agreed that it was this dystonia effect from the meds. She e-prescribed into Hy-Vee, our pharmacy, half the dosage he had done. And we tried that for 2 weeks. The eye effect went away. His behavior did not worsen. That was the fear that if we start drawing back his meds, that then his behaviors would increase. So all of that happened with a simple iPhone. I didn't have to pull him out of day hab. We didn't have to take the day off work. We didn't have to go through that whole process that I said of taking him to a visit. So that's a simple use of technology that if I could give them a customer satisfaction rating for that, it would be through the roof. We did a change of meds that made an impact on my son's life and my life with a 3-minute iPhone video. That's my use of technology story. Okay, so a better environment. So, I've been at this a long time. Reese is 20. And so I've worked with his main provider. She's a pediatric neurologist and psychiatrist to create a better environment for Reese so that these visits aren't what I described initially. And what she's done is they have 12 exam rooms in their office. And they have taken one of those exam rooms and created what we call a sensory room. So this room, they have turned off the fluorescent light and put in a lamp. Okay, a lamp that costs $10 at Target. Instead of an exam table, it has a couch. I don't know where the couch came from, but it's not an exam table. They also put in a blanket, in a basket, and some books. And just that environment, they allow me to put some music on my iPhone when we're there that he likes. And he walks right in now. I don't have any trouble getting him into the office. He sits on the couch. The staff comes to him to take his vital signs and do what they need to do. He basically walks through the door, plops down on the couch. The environment isn't overstimulating, it's calming, and a win for him is actually a win for the provider, because now he's much more compliant. They're able to accomplish their checklist of things that they need to do, and he's calm and happy. And that really didn't take a lot of time or expense. They actually use that sensory room for a lot of kids that have ADHD and other disorders. So a better environment. And my last story is on cost savings. I feel like sometimes providers think that consumers or patients are isolated from the whole cost issue. You're not the only ones that struggle with it. So my company, where I've worked for 21 years, we're self-insured. So what that means is my company pays our medical claims directly. Okay, so if I go to the doctor and it's $100, my company writes the doctor's office a check for $100. Now we're reinsured for catastrophic things, but basically my company pays for all of our medical claims. We're self-insured. So you better believe that that puts a burden on me, knowing that my son, when he was on seizure medication, it was $1,200 every 3 weeks for his bottle of trileptal. And my company's paying that directly. Now, if he needs it, that's fine. But I have become an expert on my kid's condition over time, just like you would be with any of your family members. And I had learned at a conference that my kids would outgrow seizures during adolescence. So Reese had gone a year without a seizure, and I approached his doctor and said, could we try tapering him off of the trileptal? It's very expensive. He said, well, it's not that expensive. And I said, well, it's $1,200 every 3 weeks. He didn't believe me. He called his pharmacist while I was there in the office and verified. The pharmacist said, oh my gosh, that stuff is outrageous. So he agreed to try a tapering plan. Within 4 weeks, Reese was off of the med. And again, I don't expect the providers to be experts on every nuance of my kid's condition. I really don't. There's too much information out there. You can't be experts on everything. That doctor needed me on the team to tell him that little fact, that the kids would Fragile X kids outgrow seizures when they hit adolescence. I'm convinced that to this day, Reese might still be on the seizure meds if I hadn't said anything, because the doctor didn't want to change his meds because he said we don't like to disrupt people's medication therapy during adolescence. In that 2 years, if you do the math, it has saved my company over $24,000 just from a 5-minute conversation. So we as patients and caregivers, we are interested in cost savings just like you are. Okay, so moving on. So how do we take these stories and these concepts and create a culture of patient-centered care? So I have some theories, and we're going to talk about how you can put these theories into practice. And my theories are, number one, you've got to be asking patients and caregivers for their input. Your engagement efforts have to go beyond patient satisfaction surveys. You need to ask patients and caregivers to be part of the team. Number two, it has to be systematic. It can't just be, oh, when I think of it, I will. You have to build it into your processes. We all know if we don't build things into our routines, they just don't happen. Number three, consider adding patients to your current committees or initiatives, and I'll give you some examples of that. Number four, activate patients and caregivers. They are truly your best resource. In this world of value-based care, you can only do so many QI projects. You can only do so many lean projects. You can only do so much from a provider end to bend the cost curve and improve care. At some point, to really achieve change, we have to do things differently. It's that quote, insanity is expecting different results, doing the same thing over and over. Unless we start activating patients and caregivers, we'll never handle the rising costs and the crisis that our healthcare system is in. And then number five, redesign your practice to be more patient-centered. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to participate here because you're probably really tired of hearing me talk at this point. So let's turn this theory into a practice. So I want you to just talk amongst yourselves at your table and see if you can come up with a couple of ways that you could put this into practice. How could you ask patients and caregivers to be part of the care team or be more involved in decisions at your practice? Just take like a minute or two and see if you can come up with anything. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. Right, so first, patient and family advisory councils or PFACs. Those are an amazing way to get feedback. Sometimes that notion is intimidating to practices to set up. But there are some great case studies about the benefits of doing so and so many resources available to get one started. I would really suggest trying it. It's okay if it fails. So, Patient Family Advisory Council, sure. What else? Other ideas?
We had come up with an idea that like with our special needs or dementia or nursing home patients, that maybe come in with staff at their facility, that family doesn't come with them, then to maybe have our nurses call and engage family to come in with that patient at their neck so we can see what concerns they have, because typically the staff that comes in to just sit with them knows nothing about
Right.
their care.
As a caregiver, I love that idea. And how about the notion of maybe calling that person ahead of time to create an agenda for the visit? I would love if any of my doctor's offices ever called me in advance and said, what are your goals the next time you're here? What are the 3 things we need to cover while you're here? And we pre-plan an agenda for the visit. I think that's a great idea.
Well, at the end of even non-special needs patients, or the doctor can say, now are you going to do this? Does this sound like something that's reasonable to you, or are you just nodding at me to, like I'm going to prescribe this med, are you going to go to the pharmacy to fill it? And if you're not, then we're going to do something else.
Right, and I'm not sure it's exactly what you're saying, but there's the concept of teach back. When you give instructions to a patient and then you ask them to, repeat back to me what you've heard, or can you tell me, what you just heard me say, and see if they can grasp the concept. But that's different than the willingness to do it. Right? Yeah.
And patients who are really genuinely homebound and engage with government how doing these frequent visits, where we bring the nurse and draw the blood and do the plus see their own environment is
Yes, I've heard of groups that actually contract with agencies that do those home visits as well. So we definitely want to keep people out of the ED and out of the hospital readmissions. So the more we can do at home, that's a benefit for the patient and for your healthcare system. I've had this crazy idea of, it's so hard to get Reese into the office. I would love if my clinic had like a drive-up flu clinic. Why do I have to make an appointment to take him in for his flu shot? I'd rather just drive up, sign a piece of paper, and have them reach in the window and stab him in the arm. Drive off. And I've heard, I was in Oklahoma this week for work, and a pediatrician came up to me and said, we actually have a provider that has a difficult patient, and if it's just a medication refill, in other words, she doesn't need to do a physical exam, that happens yearly, but in between the medication refills, the mom sits in the car, the doctor goes out, lays eyes on the patient, and sits in the car and talks to the mother, because a lot of these visits for me just end up being an interview of me. And so the kid can sit there with their iPad, they don't have to even go into the office. I said, I'm going to use that story Saturday that she told me. This provider just goes out to this mom's car, sits in the car, and does what she needs to do to do the medication refill. So. If you want to implement drive-up food clinics, I might even drive over. Yeah.
We talked about how so often you can't identify who has special needs necessarily just by how they present in your office, because you do have the people that are like higher functioning.
Right.
So asking just up front, are there any accommodations that we can make for you, or for mom, or whoever it is?
Right.
And then maybe offering some, this is what we do for some other people, because a lot of patients don't even know that we are able to be flexible, so they don't think to ask. So unless we kind of prompt that, a lot of times the conversation doesn't even start.
Right, and I appreciate that a lot, because I can tell you in 20 years, I've never had a practice ask me, what really works for you here? And what doesn't work for you, and what can you do better? It's always me that initiates it. I've never been asked, and we're high utilizers, we're frequent flyers. So we would be the perfect people for someone to say, could you sit down with us for 10 minutes and just tell us your experience here, what works, what doesn't work? I heard of a practice that actually gave some of their patients iPads and asked them during their waiting room and during their visit to take pictures of what they liked and didn't like about the environment. So I don't like this poster, it's creepy. I do like this sign-in sheet. It was very easy because I just had to push a button. So take pictures of what they liked and didn't like, and then the nurse would scroll through the pictures at the end and get feedback and then share those at the next staff meeting. So I thought that was a pretty cool idea. So I'm going to move on and show you what I have put down. So how can we turn the theory of asking into practice? One would be patient interviews. Take your CAP scores. Pick 2 patients. Ask them, what do you see in these scores? Because we look at our CAP scores and we think, we interpret them, well, what do the patients think about them? You're probably doing your budgets for 2019 right now. Build in 20 $50 gift cards, 10 $50 gift cards. Ask patients to sit in on interviews and then give them a gift card at the end. You'd be amazed at what people will do for a $25 gift card. Patient interviews, focus groups, hold a lunch once a quarter. And there are so many tools out on the internet where you can get canned questions if you don't know what to ask when you have a table of patients sitting around and you don't want dead time. There are so many resources to sort of craft agendas for these types of things. And then we've already talked about the PFACs. What about putting evaluation forms right in the exam room? So one thing that I use with my staff at work, it's what's bothering me today? And I put that, or I asked the staff, I manage a call center with 42 people, and I asked them to keep it at their desk. And when something isn't working in our IT systems or in our processes or just in their environment in the day, sometimes you forget about it. Or you harbor it, you push it down inside, and then over time you become angry at the company. So I give them these forms, what's bothering me today, and then they write those down, when something comes up, and then they turn them into me at the end of the week. And it's really informative. You could do the same thing in your exam rooms. Now you don't have to make it so negative, like what's bothering me today, or any feedback you have for us. Because sometimes if I'm sitting in an exam room, I might have an idea, but I don't have anywhere to go with it. So if I could just write it down while I'm in there, you could take it or leave it. Take it to a staff meeting, talk about it. So evaluation forms. I know the CAP surveys that I filled out, they're so generic, and you don't know who's actually getting the feedback anyway. My next theory is whatever you do, I don't care what you do. I don't care if it's a PFAC, I don't care if it's interviews, I don't care if it's a quarterly focus group. Whatever you do, make it systematic or you won't do it. So how do you put systematic into practice? Set a goal, interview 2 patients a month. These are just ideas. Quarterly patient advisory lunches. Maybe Wednesdays are the day that you set those evaluation forms in the exam room. So you don't have to do it every day. Make it systematic. Okay, my next theory is that you need to embed patients in your initiatives. I just sat through a whole series of opioid initiative talks in Oklahoma, and this health system, huge health system in Oklahoma, I'm not going to name them, they've undertaken all of these opioid initiatives, and they're beautifully laid out project plans and documents. Patients were not even involved in the design of that program. And that is so often what happens in healthcare. We design a quality improvement project, we design a construction project, we remodel, we repaint, we extend our hours, we open up a nurse hotline, all without asking the patients, are you going to use this? Do you like this? Does this scare you? Will this help you? I'm thinking of a clinic I know that they remodeled their waiting room, and they put this frosted glass. You know how showers have that frosted glass that you can't see through? They put this frosted glass between the patients and the receptionist because they thought it would improve the notion of privacy, like that when a patient is up there or behind the desk, they can't see, other patients or hear conversations. So they built this elaborate remodel project with the frosted glass, and the patients hated it. They said, we feel like there's a barrier between us and the clinic, like we're the outsiders, and they hate it. So they tore it down. And all of that could have been avoided if they would have gotten some patient input in the first place. I know of another clinic that did a postcard campaign with appointment reminders, and they just had a few patients look at the postcard design before it went out. And the patient said, well, this font's too small, we can't even read it. And if we saw this, we wouldn't know who it was from, so we'd probably toss it away with our junk mail. They completely redesigned the postcard to something that made sense to them. So I just don't see how, we can do all these initiatives in healthcare, like we're going to do this to the patients, we're going to provide this for the patients, but all of this without any patient input in the design. So how can you embed patients in your initiatives? If you're doing any QI projects, which I'm sure you are, think about involving patients in the committee. You can start small and you can make the time commitment very small for the patients, and then you can pick and choose who's going to work out well. Because I can guarantee you, you'll invite patients to participate in some of your initiatives, and they might talk a lot, or they might not offer valuable input. So if you just set the expectation that we'd like you to come to a meeting and thank you very much, and then you can kind of over time figure out who the valuable patients are going to be to provide that input. But start small. So embed them in your QI projects. If you're looking at extended hours or nurse hotlines, get feedback. I've already talked about all of these things in my examples. And then the next area is to activate patients and caregivers. So I think I've emphasized enough how important it is for me to be on my kids' care team and participate in their decision making. Again, I want you to change your mindset from this is what we do to our patients, for our patients, to this is what we're doing with the patients and caregivers. It's very important for them to feel like they're part of the team. We talked about that collaborative agenda and goal setting. Your goal for your cancer patient might not be their goal at all. I've heard patients say, my goal is to end this chemotherapy so that I can be at my grandson's graduation. Your goal for them might not be their goal, so make sure that you're doing collaborative agenda and goal setting. And then teach back is what we talked about a little bit. When you say things, make sure that the patients can tell you back what they've heard. These are just different ways to activate patients and caregivers. And then lastly, design your practice around the patient. So look at your teams of care. Are patients part of the team? Are you doing bite-sized education that keeps these concepts front and center? Could you show that video that I showed at a staff meeting? Could you once a month bring in a patient to a staff meeting to talk for 5 minutes about their experience or their life? I guarantee you they would love to do that. And then think past traditional one-on-one visits. Drive-by flu clinics, like I said. The doctor who went out to the car. I've sort of had this dream that someday my son could go to his visits at the Y, like in the gym, and walk around to different stations, and he wouldn't even know who's at the doctor. I don't know, these things are crazy and nutty, but I like to think about them anyway. How great would it be for me to take him to the Y? There's balls bouncing around, there's bubble machines, and he doesn't even know he's at the doctor, and we go from station to station, and he sees his providers. I realize that would take a ton of coordination, but these are the things I think about. Let's see. So these are just what matters most to me, and I put them in quote format. So what matters most to me, from my perspective, is being part of the team, where I feel that I'm involved in decision-making, that it's a conversation. The doctor has an opinion, but then listens to my opinion. He respects me as a person who can think through things on my own. He recognizes that I am an expert on my kids, and I'm highly motivated to be. Another thing that matters to me is empathy. The doctor understands. She listens to the sidelights of our lives, and she manages my son's care to the kind of person that he is. Access and convenience. My son is much more compliant if things are quick and easy. A win for us is a win for the provider too. And costs. I'm very concerned about controlling costs, just like you are. Okay, I just have a couple more slides. So I just want to talk about how important person and family engagement is to value-based care, because I started my career at Kaiser Permanente in California. And if you're familiar at all with the Kaiser model, so Kaiser Health Plan brings on groups that they insure, and Kaiser contracts solely with the Permanente Medical Group. And then they own their own hospitals. So it's a completely contained system. And the beauty of that is that when those providers see patients, they don't bill the health plan because the health plan only contracts with them. So there's no billing that takes place. I mean, obviously they bill outside payers like Medicare and so on, but when a Kaiser doctor is seeing a Kaiser insured patient, there's no billing that occurs. So that removes a lot of what you have to deal with in the fee-for-service world right now. There are no RVUs, there's no incentive to see as many patients as you can. So if you just think about that for a minute, where all you're doing is seeing patients, and you're highly motivated to keep those patients out of the healthcare system, right? Because what's it going to impact if utilization goes up? It's going to impact your financial situation, your bottom line, because you're getting one amount to care for this employer group or this population of people. You're getting one amount every month. You're highly motivated. You're not worried about billing. You're not worried about volumes. You're worried about keeping people healthy. And I loved that mindset. Now, they have all kinds of other issues with access and horrible wait times and all that we have to work through. But I just love the mindset of letting go of the whole billing, volume, RVU environment. And I realize you're still living in a fee-for-service world, so there's that reality. But at Kaiser, the doctors were able to focus on the patient instead of generating visits. They were willing to innovate and change because they had to. If you're getting a set amount to care for a population, your only motivation is to keep that population healthy and to keep them out of using the system, to be honest. And then when they need to use it, then you're there. They were motivated to coordinate care. They were motivated to include behavioral health and social determinants because they knew that if they didn't address those things, people were going to end up back in the system. And they were motivated to activate patients. They knew that provider-led quality improvement can only go so far. And to be honest, our economy can't keep doing the same things over and over again in healthcare and expect to get different results. So we've got to take a different mindset on focusing on the patient and activating patients to manage their own health. Easier said than done. So I'm going to end with some tips from successful companies on customer focus. Amazon just became $1 trillion company. Can you believe that? $1 trillion. We see our customers as invited guests to a party, and we are the hosts. It's our job every day to make every important aspect of the customer experience a little bit better. We need that kind of mindset in healthcare. I don't think it's there yet. And your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning, from Bill Gates. So instead of viewing unhappy customers as a negative thing, view them as a resource and an opportunity. Like I said, our providers, in my experience, are like tremendous people. They are angels. They have improved our lives. It's just a lot of the system things that are very frustrating and the incentives that we've built into the healthcare system. So I'm just going to close with this quote that the greatest of all mistakes is to do nothing because you think you can only do a little. I've presented a lot of different concepts, a lot of different ideas. No one can do all of that. I'm just asking you to maybe pick one thing. There are tons of resources that are available and things about shared decision making and teach back and tools and setting up a feedback and how to do a patient focus group. All of that is out there. Pick one thing, try it. If it fails, move on to something else. But I think the greatest mistake would be to do nothing in this area. So again, thank you for your service and for your time and for having me today. And I did wear my Iowa colors. I didn't mean to, but I had a yellow sweater and shoes that got my gold and black. But I probably shouldn't end the conversation. I hope the Huskers win today, because I don't really hear about who you're playing. Like Troy State or something? Troy State. All right, well, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Susan. Our staff had heard Susan talk before and felt that this would be an excellent opportunity for us to think about the ideas that we need to work on in our clinics and offices. On behalf of SERPA-ACO, these are not Nebraska mints, but they are Nebraska-made mints, and we wanted to provide that. We have a drawing for a t-shirt, so Jolene's coming forward and we'll ask Susan to draw so there can't be considered any collusion between any of us. Avis?
We want a t-shirt.
Woo, all right.
Avis wants a t-shirt.
They're ready for food.
Okay, lunch is ready, it's a buffet. It's 11:30 on the dot. We'll be back at 12:30. So our original program said 12:45, but I don't know what you can do. I'm so used to eating in 10 minutes anyway, you know. When I was in grade school, you had 30 minutes to play and eat, and you learned to eat in 10 minutes so that you could play for 20. So we're not going to play that long, but anyway, we'll be back at 12:30.